The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, cutting through the silence of my empty house like a blade through paper. I was sitting in my recliner, watching late-night television with the sound turned low, nursing my third beer of the evening. The same routine I'd followed for the past 6 months since Emma moved back to California. I almost didn't answer. Almost. The number on the caller ID was unfamiliar, but something about the timing made my gut clench. In 23 years as a paramedic, I'd learned to trust those instincts. Late-night calls rarely brought good news. "Mitchell," I answered. "This is a collect call from Riverside Correctional Facility. Will you accept charges from inmate David Hartwell?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My hand froze on the receiver. David Hartwell. The name I'd tried to forget for 2 years. The man who was supposed to marry my daughter. The man with 2 previous wives who'd both suffered mysterious accidents involving household chemicals. The man I'd helped put behind bars. My living room suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Patterson's porch light flickering across the street. Normal suburban life continuing while my past crawled out of its grave. "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll take it." Static crackled through the line. Then his voice came through, rougher than I remembered, but unmistakably him. Prison had scraped something raw from his throat. "Mitchell, I wasn't sure you'd take the call." "What do you want, Hartwell?" "Listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once," he said. I could hear voices in the background, the institutional sounds of men living in cages. "Your ex-wife. She's doing it again. To another family, another daughter." The beer bottle slipped from my other hand, hitting the carpet with a dull thud. Foam spread across the beige fibers, but I couldn't move to clean it up. "What are you talking about?" "Katherine. She's in Millfield now, about 2 hours north of where you used to live. Found herself a widow named Margaret Henderson. Henderson's got a 20-year-old daughter, pretty little thing named Ashley." My throat went dry. "How do you know this?" "Because Katherine's been writing to me, sending me pictures, updates on her progress." His laugh was bitter, metallic. "She thinks it's funny, keeping me informed about her new projects." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I may be a piece of garbage, Mitchell, but I'm not a monster. What Katherine did to your family, what she made me part of. I can live with a lot of things. But watching her do it again to some other kid?" The line went quiet except for the background noise of the prison. Guards shouting orders, metal doors slamming, the soundtrack of consequences. "She's not who you think she is, man. None of them are. This whole thing, it's bigger than what happened to us. Katherine, she's got friends, other women, they work together, finding families, targeting daughters. It's like a business for them." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the kitchen floor. The connection held, Hartwell's voice now distant and tinny. "Mitchell? You there? Mitchell, you need to listen to me. The Henderson girl. She's already moved in with the guy. Some rich piece of work named Richard Brennan. Katherine arranged the whole thing. And Brennan, he's got a history. 2 wives, both gone under suspicious circumstances." I picked up the phone with shaking hands. "How long?" I managed. "The engagement party's this weekend. Katherine's organizing it, just like she did for Emma." The connection crackled with interference. "My time's up," Hartwell said. "But Mitchell, whatever you did to stop Katherine before, it wasn't enough. She's still out there, still hunting." The line went end. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, staring at the phone, trying to process what I'd heard. 2 years earlier, I thought I'd already destroyed her. Thought I'd ended her ability to hurt people. Thought justice had been served when David Hartwell went to prison and Katherine lost everything in our divorce. But justice, I was learning, was a much more complicated thing than I'd imagined. 2 years before that phone call, I was still living the lie, still believing in the illusion that Katherine had spent 22 years perfecting. My name is Tom Mitchell, and I used to believe in Sunday dinners. Used to think my wife Katherine had cornered the market on virtue, what with her charity galas and her perfectly curated social media presence showing her volunteering at soup kitchens and organizing book drives for underprivileged children. Used to think our daughter Emma, 19 and brilliant, would marry someone decent and give us grandchildren who'd visit on holidays and call me Grandpa Tom. Shows you how much I knew about anything. I'm a paramedic. 23 years running emergency calls in Jefferson County, seeing people at their absolute worst moments, learning to read situations fast and make life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. You'd think that kind of experience would have prepared me for recognizing the emergency happening in my own house. You'd be wrong. Katherine had this way of making everything seem not just normal, but aspirational. Our house was always clean, always smelled like whatever seasonal candle she'd picked up from that expensive boutique downtown. Dinner was on the table at 6:30 sharp, unless I was working late, in which case she'd leave a covered plate in the refrigerator with a note explaining what everything was and how long to reheat it. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family that appeared in insurance commercials. Stable, comfortable, happy. The truth was more complicated. Katherine controlled everything through suggestions that felt like collaboration, through questions that felt like interest, through concern that felt like love. "Don't you think Emma should focus more on her social development this year?" she'd say, arranging fresh flowers in the vase on our kitchen island. Katherine cut flowers from our garden every Tuesday and Friday, rotating them with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. She spends too much time reading. She needs to learn how to navigate relationships. Emma was a sophomore at State, studying pre-law with a 3.8 GPA. She came home most weekends, did her laundry in our basement, and sat at our kitchen table working on papers while Katherine cooked dinner. She was focused, driven, and had never given us a moment's trouble in 19 years. But according to Katherine, Emma needed work. "I've been thinking," Katherine said one Saturday morning in late September, scrolling through her phone while I read the paper. "There's someone I'd like Emma to meet." I looked up from the sports section. Katherine was wearing her casual weekend outfit, designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment, and a sweater that she'd describe as just something I picked up, but that I knew she'd spent an hour selecting. "Someone from church?" I asked. "No, someone from the country club, David Hartwell. He owns those car dealerships on Route 9. I knew the name. Hartwell Automotive had billboards all over the county featuring a middle-aged man in an expensive suit standing next to luxury cars, promising the best deals and the highest quality service. Isn't he a little old for her? Katherine's fingers paused on her phone screen for just a moment. He's 42. That's not old, Tom. That's mature, established. Emma's 19. Emma's always been mature for her age. You know that. She looked up at me with that patient expression she wore when she thought I was being deliberately obtuse. David has a beautiful home, a successful business, excellent connections in the community. He's the kind of man who could provide Emma with real stability. She's 19, I said again. She should be dating college boys, not businessmen old enough to be her father. Katherine set down her phone and turned to face me fully. When she did that, gave me her complete attention, I knew I was about to be managed. Tom, I know you want to protect Emma. That's natural, but you can't protect her from growing up. And wouldn't you rather she learn about relationships from someone who's proven he can provide for a family? Someone who's past the immature games that boys her age play? There was something in the way she said, proven he can provide for a family, that made my skin itch, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Has Emma even met this guy? I introduced them last week at the charity auction. They had a lovely conversation. David was very taken with her. This was news to me. Emma hadn't mentioned meeting anyone named David. What did Emma think of him? Katherine's smile was radiant. She thought he was charming, very sophisticated, a real gentleman. That afternoon, I asked Emma about it directly. She was in the living room, textbook spread across the coffee table, highlighter in hand. Mom says you met someone at that auction thing last week. Emma looked up, her expression neutral. David Hartwell. He seems nice. Nice how? She shrugged. I don't know. Polite. He asked about school, about what I want to do after graduation. Normal stuff. Mom thinks you two hit it off. Mom thinks a lot of things. Emma went back to her textbook, but there was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. A flatness that I recognized from my work, the tone people used when they were talking about something they didn't want to talk about. If this guy makes you uncomfortable, he doesn't make me uncomfortable, Dad. It felt like he was interviewing me, like he had a checklist or something. She looked up again. Mom really likes him. Over the next few weeks, David Hartwell became a regular topic of conversation in our house. Katherine mentioned him constantly, his business success, his beautiful home on Maple Hill, his involvement in various community organizations. She shared details about his life with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a favorite television show. David's first wife was an artist, she said one evening over dinner. Very talented, apparently. She died in a car accident about 5 years ago. So tragic. What about his second wife? Emma asked. Katherine paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. Second wife? You said first wife. That implies there was a second. Oh, yes. Patricia. She passed away last year. Some kind of household accident. David doesn't like to talk about it. He's very private about his grief. 2 wives. Both gone. I made a mental note to look into that, though I wasn't sure why. He sounds like he's had a lot of loss in his life, Emma said carefully. Which is exactly why he needs someone like you, Katherine replied. Someone young and vibrant who can bring joy back into his world. The way she said it made it sound like Emma was a prescription rather than a person. David started calling the house in October, always polite, always asking to speak with Emma. Their conversations were brief, formal, the kind of exchanges you might have with a business associate rather than someone you were interested in dating. He's very respectful, Katherine said approvingly after one such call. He understands the importance of proper courtship. Emma's reaction was harder to read. She answered his calls, spoke with him pleasantly, but never seemed excited about the contact. When I asked her directly how she felt about David's attention, she gave me the same shrug she'd been using since she was 12. He's fine, Dad. Mom thinks he's great, and he hasn't done anything wrong. It's not like we're engaged or anything. But Katherine was clearly moving in that direction. She suggested group outings, dinner at upscale restaurants, cultural events at the community center, charity functions where David could show Emma off to his social circle. Emma went along with it all, pleasant and accommodating, but I could see the light in her eyes dimming with each passing week. The turning point came in November, when Katherine announced that David had invited Emma to spend Thanksgiving weekend at his house. Just Emma? I asked. Well, David's hosting his extended family. It would be a wonderful opportunity for Emma to meet everyone, to see how a well-established family operates. She has a family. This family. Katherine's patience was wearing thin. I could see it in the way her smile tightened at the corners. Tom, you're being selfish. This is about Emma's future, not your feelings. Emma's future is her choice to make. Emma's 19 years old. She needs guidance, not indulgence. That night, after Katherine had gone to bed, I knocked on Emma's door. She was at her desk, working on a paper for her constitutional law class. You don't have to go to David's for Thanksgiving if you don't want to, I said. She didn't look up from her laptop. I know. But you're going anyway. Mom really wants me to, and David's been so nice. It would be rude to say no at this point. Since when do you care about being rude to people you barely know? That got her attention. She turned in her chair to face me, and I saw something in her expression that I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. Confusion, maybe fear. "Dad, do you think I'm making a mistake?" "I think you should trust your instincts." "My instincts are telling me that something's off, but Mom says that's normal, that I'm just nervous because David's more mature than the boys I've known. She says I need to give it a real chance." "What do your instincts tell you is off?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "He talks about the future a lot. Our future. Like it's already decided. He's mentioned things like where we'll live after I graduate, what kind of wedding his family would expect, how many children he wants. We've been on maybe 6 dates, Dad. 6 awkward, formal dates where he mostly talks about his business and his house and his plans. Have you told your mother this?" "I tried. She said I was overthinking things, that I should be flattered by his interest. She said most girls my age would kill for the kind of attention David's giving me." I sat down on her bed, trying to figure out how to say what I was thinking without sounding like a paranoid father. "Emma, you don't owe anyone anything. Not David, not your mother, not me. You're 19 years old. You have your entire life ahead of you. There's no rush to make any decisions about anything." She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her face. Emma had always been a people-pleaser, always trying to meet everyone's expectations. Katherine had cultivated that quality in her, praised her for being considerate and mature when she put other people's needs ahead of her own. "I'll think about it," she said finally. But I knew she wouldn't. Katherine had already made the decision for her, the way Katherine made all the important decisions in our house, the way she'd been making them for 22 years. I just didn't realize yet how dangerous those decisions could be. The discovery came on a Thursday in late November, while Emma was at David's house for what Katherine called a pre-Thanksgiving family integration dinner. I was supposed to be working a double shift, but my partner called in sick and I ended up getting sent home early. The house felt different when Katherine wasn't expecting me. Quieter, but also somehow heavier, like the air itself was holding secrets. I was cleaning out the garage, a chore I'd been putting off for months, when I knocked over a stack of boxes near Katherine's desk area. She'd claimed the space years ago for her charity work and social organizing, turning it into a command center complete with filing cabinets, a computer, and bulletin boards covered with contact information and event schedules. When the boxes fell, papers scattered across the concrete floor. I was gathering them up, trying to sort Katherine's meticulously organized files back into their proper order, when I saw the folder. It was mislabeled. Instead of St. Mary's Food Drive, October, which is what the tab read, it contained legal documents, medical records, and newspaper clippings, all related to David Hartwell. My hands started shaking as I spread the papers across Katherine's desk. David's first wife, Linda Hartwell, had died 3 years ago at the age of 38. The death certificate listed the cause as accidental household chemical exposure. The newspaper obituary was brief, but mentioned that Linda had been found unconscious in her laundry room, overcome by fumes from what investigators determined to be a dangerous combination of cleaning products. The medical examiner's report was more detailed. Linda had been found by David when he returned home from a business trip. She'd been doing laundry, apparently mixing bleach-based and ammonia-based cleaners, a combination that produced deadly chloramine gas. The report noted that Linda was an experienced homemaker who would have known better than to mix cleaning chemicals, but concluded that accidents happen, especially when people are tired or distracted. David had been out of town at the time, attending a car dealers convention in Chicago. Hotel receipts, airline tickets, witness statements. His alibi was ironclad. Patricia Hartwell, David's second wife, had died just 18 months later. Same cause of death, same circumstances, found unconscious in the basement utility room, overcome by fumes from mixed cleaning chemicals. Same mysterious lapse in judgment from a woman who, according to friends and family, was normally very careful about household safety. And again, David had been out of town, this time at his mother's funeral in Florida. The insurance payouts were substantial. Linda's policy had been for $500,000. Patricia's was $750,000. Both policies had been increased within 6 months of each woman's death, at David's suggestion, according to notes in the insurance files. But what made my blood run cold were the handwritten notes in the margins. Katherine's handwriting, neat and precise as always. L. Isolated, no close family, trusting nature. P. Recently divorced, grateful for attention, eager to please. Both responded well to gradual introduction of cleaning routines. D. Confirmed timeline flexibility for both incidents. I sat in Katherine's desk chair, staring at the papers, trying to process what I was seeing. These weren't random documents. This was research, planning, a case study in successful manipulation and potential murder. Katherine hadn't just known about David's history. She'd been involved in it. The garage door opener rumbled to life, and I heard Katherine's car pulling into the driveway. I had maybe 30 seconds before she came inside. I photographed everything with my phone, working as fast as my shaking hands would allow. Then I shoved the papers back into the folder and buried it in the stack where I'd found it. By the time Katherine walked through the door, I was back to organizing scattered files, playing the role of the helpful husband cleaning up his own mess. "You're home early," she said, not sounding particularly pleased about it. "Murphy called in sick. How was Emma's dinner?" "Lovely. David's family is very welcoming. They already treat Emma like she belongs there." Katherine hung up her coat and moved toward her desk area. I held my breath, but she didn't seem to notice anything out of place. "David thinks Emma should spend Christmas with them as well," she continued. "His family has a tradition of spending the holidays at their cabin in the mountains. Very rustic and romantic." Sounds isolated. Sounds peaceful. Emma needs to learn to appreciate the quieter pleasures in life. That night, after Katherine had gone to bed, I sat in my truck in our driveway, staring at the photos on my phone. The evidence was all there, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. Calling the police seemed like the obvious choice, but I knew how this would look. Jealous father can't accept his daughter's new boyfriend, tries to frame innocent man with circumstantial evidence and wild conspiracy theories. David's alibis were solid. The deaths had been ruled accidental by professional investigators, and Katherine would deny everything, would claim I'd fabricated the documents, or taken them out of context, or misunderstood her notes. She'd paint me as unstable, paranoid, desperate to sabotage Emma's happiness. But I couldn't do nothing. Not with Emma spending more and more time at David's house, not with Katherine pushing for deeper involvement with his family. I started with the medical records. In 23 years as a paramedic, I'd responded to dozens of accidental poisoning calls. I knew the signs, the timeline, the typical circumstances. What I read in Linda and Patricia Hartwell's files didn't match the pattern. Both women had been found with elevated levels of chloramine gas in their systems, but also traces of sedatives. Small amounts, barely detectable, but enough to slow reaction times and cloud judgment. The kind of thing that might make a careful person careless, or prevent someone from escaping a dangerous situation as quickly as they should. Both women had been found in enclosed spaces with poor ventilation, despite the fact that their normal laundry routines involved keeping doors and windows open for air circulation. Both women had been doing laundry at unusual times, Linda at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, Patricia at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. Neither was typical behavior for women who, according to friends and family, were creatures of routine. I made copies of everything and put them in a safety deposit box. Then I started making calls. Linda Hartwell's sister lived in Pennsylvania. It took me 3 tries to reach her, and another hour of careful conversation to get her to open up about her sister's death. Linda was scared the last few months, she told me. She said David was pushing her to change things around the house. New cleaning products, new routines. He was very particular about how things should be done. Did she say why that frightened her? Linda wasn't the type to be frightened easily, but she said David would get angry if she didn't follow his instructions exactly. Not yelling angry, but cold angry, like she disappointed him. Patricia Hartwell's brother was harder to track down, but when I finally reached him, his story was similar. Patty called me a week before she died, he said. She was talking about moving out, maybe getting her own place. She said David was becoming controlling, that he had very specific ideas about how a wife should behave. Did she mention anything about cleaning routines? Funny you should ask that. Yeah, she did. Said David had bought all these new cleaning products, expensive stuff, and he wanted her to use them in a specific order. She thought it was weird, but she went along with it because she didn't want to fight. Two women, both developing concerns about David's controlling behavior. Both gone within months of expressing those concerns. I had enough circumstantial evidence to raise serious questions, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to stop Katherine or save Emma. David was too careful, too well prepared. His alibis were perfect because he didn't need to be present for the murders. He just needed to set the stage and let his victims' trust in him do the rest. But Katherine was a different problem entirely. Katherine was local, visible, involved in Emma's daily life. Katherine could be exposed in ways that David couldn't. The dinner party was Katherine's idea, of course. A celebration of Emma and David's growing relationship, as she put it. An opportunity for our friends and neighbors to meet David, to see what a wonderful match Katherine had arranged for her daughter. She invited 12 people, the Hendersons from next door, the Clarks from down the street, Dr. Reeves and his wife from Katherine's book club, the minister from our church and his wife, and David's business partner with his girlfriend. Katherine spent 3 days preparing. She hired a catering service, but insisted on doing the final presentation herself. The house was spotless, the dining room table set with our best china, fresh flowers arranged with mathematical precision. Emma came home from college for the dinner, looking nervous and uncomfortable in the dress Katherine had bought for her. Something expensive and conservative, the kind of outfit a politician's wife might wear to a campaign function. "You look beautiful," Katherine said, adjusting Emma's necklace. "David is going to be so proud." Emma caught my eye in the hallway mirror, and I saw a flash of something that might have been a plea for help. But before I could respond, the doorbell rang, and Katherine was gliding toward the front door with her hostess smile firmly in place. David arrived precisely on time, carrying flowers for Katherine and a small wrapped box for Emma. He was wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and he moved through our house like he already owned it. "Tom," he said, shaking my hand with just the right amount of pressure. "Thank you for having me. Katherine's told me so much about your work as a paramedic. Such an important profession." "Someone has to clean up the messes," I said. His smile never wavered, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Indeed. Prevention is always preferable to treatment, don't you think?" The other guests arrived in clusters, and Katherine orchestrated the evening with her usual flawless precision. Cocktails in the living room, dinner in the dining room, dessert and coffee back in the living room. Conversation flowed smoothly from topic to topic, guided by Katherine's gentle questions and David's charming anecdotes about his business success. Emma sat quietly through most of it, smiling when spoken to, answering questions politely, but contributing little to the conversation. I watched David watching her, noting her responses, cataloging her behavior like a scientist studying a specimen. "Emma's thinking about changing her major," Katherine announced during dessert. "Aren't you, sweetheart?" Emma looked surprised. "I am?" "We discussed it last week, remember? How pre-law might be too stressful, too competitive? David thinks Emma would be happier in something more nurturing. I think Emma should study whatever interests her, I said. David leaned forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on me. Of course, every young woman should pursue her passions, but it's also important to consider practical matters, family obligations, the kind of life she wants to build. Emma's 20 years old. She has plenty of time to figure out what kind of life she wants. Time has a way of slipping away faster than we expect, David said smoothly. I learned that lesson the hard way, losing Linda and Patricia so young. Life is precious. We shouldn't waste opportunities when they present themselves. The table went quiet. David had mentioned his previous wives casually, but there was something in his tone that made everyone uncomfortable. Katherine jumped in to fill the silence. David's been so patient with Emma's uncertainty about the future. Not every man would be so understanding. Understanding about what? I asked. About her reluctance to commit, to make decisions. Emma's always been a bit of a perfectionist, wanting to analyze every option instead of trusting her instincts. Maybe her instincts are telling her to be careful, I said. That's when David made his mistake. Just a flash of something ugly crossing his face before the charming mask slipped back into place. But I saw it, and more importantly, Dr. Reeves saw it. The man had been a psychiatrist for 30 years. He knew predatory behavior when he saw it. Careful about what? David asked, his voice still pleasant but with an edge underneath. I looked around the table at our friends and neighbors, people who'd known Emma since she was a child, people who'd watched her grow up into a smart, independent young woman, people who would remember this conversation later when they needed to. Funny thing about accidents, I said, my voice cutting through the dinner party conversation like a scalpel. They tend to repeat when the same man keeps buying the poison. The room went dead silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. David's smile froze on his face like a mask made of ice. Katherine's face went white, then red. Tom, perhaps you should... Actually, I should go, I said, standing up slowly. I looked directly at David, watching his pupils dilate with fear or rage or both. But first, I think everyone should know that the local police department will be very interested in reviewing David's insurance claims, both of them. I walked out without another word, leaving behind the wreckage of Katherine's perfect dinner party and the careful facade she'd spent months building. Police cars showed up an hour later. The investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Katherine calling me unstable, vindictive, jealous. 3 weeks of Emma refusing to speak to me. 3 weeks of watching our perfect suburban facade crumble in real time. But the evidence was overwhelming. David Hartwell was arrested on 2 counts of suspected homicide. The insurance companies launched their own investigations. The local news picked up the story. Katherine's response was swift and brutal. She filed for divorce, claiming I'd orchestrated the entire situation out of spite. She moved Emma into her sister's house. She started a whisper campaign through her social circles about my mental health, my drinking habits, my inability to handle stress. None of it was true, but Katherine had always been gifted at shaping narratives. The trial never happened. David took a plea deal: involuntary manslaughter for Patricia, accidental death for Linda, 7 years in Riverside Correctional. Emma eventually came home, shaken and angry. Not at David, not at Katherine, but at everyone. The world had betrayed her trust in the most fundamental way possible. I almost married him, she said one night, sitting in our living room like a stranger. I almost... But you didn't, I said. That's what matters. She looked at me with eyes that seemed decades older than her 21 years. Did you know? When you first met him, did you know? I suspected something was wrong. I didn't know what. She nodded slowly. Mom did. She had to have known. That was the last real conversation we had. Emma left for college early, transferred to a school across the country. Katherine finalized the divorce 6 months later. The house sold within a week. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital and tried to convince myself that justice had been served. Katherine lost her social standing. David went to prison. Emma was safe. For 2 years, I believed it was over. The phone call changed everything. "She's part of something bigger," David had said. "She finds them, cleans them, delivers them." I couldn't sleep after that. Couldn't stop thinking about the certainty in his voice, the way he'd said, "again." As if Katherine's involvement with him hadn't been an aberration, but a pattern. I started with Katherine's social media. Even after everything, she'd rebuilt her image with impressive efficiency. New city, new charity work, new circle of friends, new causes to champion, new families to help, including the Hendersons. Margaret Henderson, recently widowed, mother of a 20-year-old daughter named Ashley. Katherine had connected with them through a grief support group, offering guidance and friendship during Margaret's difficult transition. In Katherine's latest posts, she was photographed at charity events with the Hendersons. Ashley was beautiful, trusting, clearly grateful for Katherine's maternal attention, and in several photos, Katherine was introducing Ashley to various men, older men, successful men, men with histories. I drove to Millfield, the small town where Katherine had relocated. 2 hours north, far enough from our old life that she could reinvent herself without baggage. I found Margaret Henderson's address through public records. Margaret was in her garden when I knocked, a woman in her 50s who moved with the careful precision of someone still learning to live alone. "I'm Tom Mitchell," I said. "I need to talk to you about Katherine Holloway." Margaret's face brightened. "Oh, you know Katherine? She's been such a blessing since Robert passed. I don't know what Ashley and I would have done without her." "She's my ex-wife," I said. "And I think your daughter might be in danger." Margaret's expression shifted, concern replacing warmth. "I'm sorry. I don't understand." I told her about David Hartwell, about Emma, about the pattern I was beginning to see. Margaret listened with growing alarm. "The man Katherine introduced Ashley to," I said. "Richard Brennan. What do you know about his previous relationships?" "He's been married twice," Margaret said slowly. "Both wives passed away. Richard said it was very difficult for him, losing them both to accidents." "What kind of accidents?" "Carbon monoxide poisoning, from a faulty furnace in their cabin." The same pattern. Different method, same result. "Where is Ashley now?" I asked. "She's at Richard's house. They're planning an engagement party for next weekend." I felt that familiar ice water sensation in my veins. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to call your daughter right now." Ashley didn't answer her phone. Neither did Katherine. Richard Brennan's number went straight to voicemail. Margaret and I drove to Richard's address together. The house was dark, 2 cars in the driveway. Katherine's silver sedan and Richard's black truck. I walked around the property looking for signs of life. The back door was unlocked. Inside, the house was silent except for the hum of central air conditioning. I found them in the basement. Ashley was unconscious on a couch, breathing but unresponsive. Katherine was standing near a space heater that shouldn't have been running in summer, adjusting something on the gas line. Richard was nowhere to be seen. "Step away from that," I said. Katherine turned, not surprised to see me. "Hello, Tom. I wondered when you'd figure it out." "Where's Richard?" "Upstairs, making sure everything looks like an accident. Carbon monoxide is so unpredictable." I moved toward Ashley, but Katherine pulled a small knife from her pocket. Nothing dramatic, just a kitchen paring knife, but sharp enough. "I wouldn't," she said. "Ashley will be fine if you just walk away. This doesn't concern you." "Like Emma didn't concern me?" "Emma was different. Emma was my daughter. This is business." "Business?" Katherine smiled, the same smile she'd worn at dinner parties and charity events. Insurance payouts are just the beginning, Tom. These men are useful in other ways. Richard has connections, political influence. David had money and social standing. They provide access to things that matter. And when they're not useful anymore, accidents happen. I lunged for the space heater, knocking it over before Katherine could stop me. She slashed at me with the knife, catching my forearm, but I grabbed her wrist and forced her to drop it. Footsteps on the stairs. Richard appeared, looking confused and angry. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Call 911, I shouted to Margaret, who was standing frozen in the doorway. "Tell them we need paramedics and police." Richard moved toward me, but stopped when he saw Ashley unconscious on the couch. "What did you do to her?" he said to Katherine. "What we planned," Katherine said calmly. "What you paid me to do." Richard's face went white. I thought this was just about the insurance." "It was never just about insurance," Katherine said. The sirens started in the distance. Ashley recovered fully. Richard Brennan was arrested for conspiracy and attempted fraud. Katherine was charged with attempted manslaughter and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. But the investigation revealed something larger. A network of women, all recently divorced or widowed, all with access to vulnerable families, all connected to Katherine through various social groups and charitable organizations. They called it a Black Widow ring, though that wasn't quite accurate. These weren't women targeting wealthy men for their money. They were targeting families, identifying daughters who could be manipulated into dangerous relationships, facilitating connections with men who had histories of suspicious accidents involving their wives. Katherine had been running this network for almost a decade. Emma and I had just been the beginning. She was sentenced to 12 years. Richard got 8. David Hartwell's sentence was extended after prosecutors connected him to the broader conspiracy. Emma came home for the trial. We sat together in the courtroom, watching Katherine in her orange jumpsuit, listening to victim impact statements from families across 3 states. "She never loved us, did she?" Emma asked during a recess. "I think she loved the idea of us," I said. "The way we made her look, the way we fit into her plans." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." 6 months later, I got a call from Detective Patterson, the lead investigator on Katherine's case. "We found something you should know about," she said. "Katherine's been making calls from prison to women who fit the profile of her previous recruits." "What kind of calls?" "The kind that involves getting even with the people who put her away." Patterson showed me transcripts of Katherine's phone calls, coded conversations about old friends who need visits, and unfinished business that needs attention. My name came up frequently. So did Emma's. "She's not going to stop," Emma said that night, reading through the transcripts. "No, she's not." "So what do we do?" I thought about that for a long time. Katherine had spent years building networks, cultivating relationships, positioning herself as the helpful friend who could solve problems. She'd used people's trust against them. But trust was a two-way street. "We use her own methods against her," I said finally. The plan took months to develop. I reached out to Margaret Henderson and the other families Katherine had targeted. I contacted journalists who'd covered the case. I spoke with prosecutors who'd worked on similar cases in other states. We organized a press conference for the anniversary of Katherine's sentencing. Victims' families, law enforcement officials, prosecutors from multiple jurisdictions, not to relitigate the case, but to shed light on the broader network. Emma had spent those months tracking Katherine's financial records, following money trails that investigators had missed. What she'd found was a web of insurance fraud, political corruption, and organized manipulation that extended far beyond what had been prosecuted. "My mother didn't just target families," Emma said, addressing the cameras directly. "She was part of a systematic operation that has been running for over a decade, and the people she worked with are still out there." She named names, provided documentation, presented evidence that connected Katherine's network to similar operations in 12 other states. By the time the press conference ended, the FBI had opened new investigations in 6 jurisdictions. Katherine's associates began distancing themselves from her with impressive speed. The phone calls from prison stopped. Katherine served 8 years of her 12-year sentence before being released on parole. By then, her network had completely collapsed. Most of her associates were in prison or under indictment. She moved to a small town in Montana after her release, taking a job at a gas station and living in a trailer park. No charity work, no social connections, no access to the kind of families she'd once preyed on. Emma had moved on with her life, working as a fraud investigator for an insurance company. She'd found a way to use what Katherine had taught her, but in service of justice rather than manipulation. I never saw Katherine again, but Emma sent me a photo once. Katherine at 58, looking older than her years, pumping gas for a customer who had no idea who she was. Just another middle-aged woman working a minimum-wage job, invisible and powerless. Justice doesn't always look like what you expect, Emma said when she showed me the picture. She was right. Katherine's punishment wasn't prison, it was irrelevance. As the sirens drowned the applause, I realized something simple. She never wanted truth, just the illusion of control. Tonight, I took that too.